Welcome tonight to our March 21st FENG meeting. Tim Domini is our guest speaker. He's a FENG member, along with most of us here, and I welcome our guests. And we'll go from there. And then at the end, we'll have a quick introduction of everybody. And Tim, we'll go from there. You take questions along the way, or how you want to handle that?
Yeah. So I mean, I have death by slides, but I'm certainly hopeful that people will comment and jump in when they see something they don't agree with. As a backgrounder, I transitioned to not-for-profit work on a full-time basis in 2005. Before that, I had worked for a startup consulting firm. And what I discovered was that my favorite clients were my not-for-profit clients. So after spending 5 years of consulting with various small client organizations, I put together a non-for-profit resume. 2 weeks later, I had an interview at a place called the Brennan Center for Justice, and I was hired on, and I stayed 10 years there. And then, like a lot of people, I just wanted to know if the grass was greener. And I transitioned out, and then I landed at an organization called the New York Restoration Project, which creates green spaces in New York City and is most famous for being founded by Bette Midler. So I spent time going to board meetings with Bette Midler and her daughter. But I went to Babson College for finance and management, and have an MBA in management, and have basically done cost and financial planning and projections my entire career, whether it was in for-profit or not-for-profit. So I'm gonna, whoopsie, I just screwed that all up. I'm gonna share my screen now as soon as I get it back open. There we go. So is everybody seeing what I'm seeing? I see transitioning to not-for-profit, thoughts on how to make successful transition.
Yep.
Okay, great. It worked. So many times I meet folks who say, I'm so tired of working to make more money for some owner. I want to make a difference in the world. And I say, I love the work my organization is doing. I'm stoked to go and try to make the world a better place every day. So come to the light. Join the non-for-profit world. So let's talk about what the non-for-profit industry is about. It's if you Google how many non-for-profits are there in the United States, you don't get a straight answer. But it's about a 1.5 million organizations, and of that, only 20% have a budget of greater than $1 million. Interestingly enough, non-for-profits account for 1 out of every 10 or more jobs in America, but non-for-profit job growth is faster than for-profit job growth. So at some point, it's going to be better than 10% of all jobs available. Non-for-profits represent 10% of our national GDP. So if our GDP is $20 trillion, non-for-profits spend about $2 trillion annually. A little less than half of that is payroll. This is all from a charities.org conversation from 2 years ago. So you can see the point of this is that non-for-profits is this huge array of types of work, and there's a lot of different types of non-for-profits. So, you have to think about that. So how do you learn the industry, and how do you move forward with your transition? And again, so I've been running a non-for-profit FENG SIG for apparently 12 years or more. And every meeting, there's someone who wants to transition to non-for-profit work. And over time, the questions that have come up and the answers that have come up evolved into this sort of summary conversation that we're going to have tonight. So the first thing that I recommend to anybody who's actually interested in non-for-profits is to learn the language of non-for-profits, get familiar with the format of the governance, understand the role of the non-for-profit board, and remember the 3 S's: stewardship, sustainability, solvency. And that's my 3 S's. So I don't know if a lot of people use that. And then joining a board is a great way to meet people. So people who volunteer for boards, if they're good, eventually are on more than one board. So if you're on a board, you will network to people who can bring you to the next organization. Also, once you get into your head that you're doing service and helping, it becomes that it's part of the DNA of the people you're with. And also, boards traditionally will have people who've been on boards for decades. And if you join a board, you'll find a mentor. You'll find somebody who'll say, "Oh, I'd love to see you, continue to serve." So this is the number one and most basic. So there's Lee Tucker has just formed an organization called Board to Board, which is BORED to BOARD, Board to Board, and it's a website that links people who are interested in joining boards to actual boards that need people. And one of the great things is we're all financial guys in this room, and you're going to find that financial guys are pretty popular on boards, and that often, the give or get can be adjusted for the fact that, you'll volunteer to be on the finance committee or something like that. The other thing that I've seen really work is people who volunteer. There's a woman who's a high-end financial manager for the New York Botanical Gardens. What was her introduction to the Botanical Garden? She volunteered to be a gardener. And she learned the organization from the inside. And it really paid off for her, obviously. She's got a really nice job with them now. And she's you can't beat learning something while doing it, and understanding the program can be the key for some missions. And there are actually professional development opportunities especially in the finance area. So most famously in New York City, the Robin Hood Foundation does a cohort once a year of about 15 people, where they train people who come from for-profit backgrounds to work at a high level in non-for-profits. So one of my co-chairs at my program, at my SIG, is a guy named Jason Rock. Jason Rock was in the first Robin Hood cohort, and he is now some fancy pants title, like the assistant senior vice president of finance for the Children's Aid Society. There are a number of classroom opportunities. I'm sure you could take classroom courses in non-for-profit accounting. You could take classroom courses in non-for-profit management. There's 2 or 3 colleges in New York, the New School, Stern, they offer courses. And I'm sure there's similar courses in the Philly area. And never underestimate direct participation. So, like I said, if you can volunteer, if you can work in a board, these things really count for your professional development. They'll really help you understand non-for-profit. And it's something, what you do for a non-for-profit is something that shows who you are. Involvement is commitment, and commitment, I'll talk about cultural fit with non-for-profits a little later. So that's really, really important. And exposure to programmatic experiences means you will understand non-for-profit life that much more. So is anybody's head exploding yet, or everybody's fine with what I'm saying? You get the drift? Great. So let's talk a little bit about cultural fit. So non-for-profits are much more sensitive to cultural fit and therefore more open to non-traditional paths to positions. So I'm I worked for one of the largest legal head legal research firms in the country as their numbers guy for 10 years. During my interview, I actually talked about my interest in American history and it didn't have a lot to do with accounting, but it showed that I had an appreciation for voting rights. So you need to take the time to think about your fit, and you need to take the time to think about what culturally talks to you. And I do think this is a very different way to think than when you go out looking for jobs in the for-profit world, right? Most of the time you're like, this is my skill set, this is what I can do for you. And in non-for-profits, they're going to ask you, well, how will you fit working with X? And do you understand our mission? So they're going to ask you to work, they're going to assume your skill set, and everything's going to be about fit, and everything's going to be about relationship to the mission. So I had a member of my chapter group, and he was like in credits and collections for 30 years. And he really just didn't want to do it anymore. And he wanted to make a change in the world and help the world. And I kept saying to him, well, you can't just walk in and say, I know everything you need to know about collections. That's not necessarily a big problem with non-for-profits because people want to give you money. And he said, well, both my parents are in an Alzheimer's facility. And I said, dude, so it's important to you and you have a real story there. Maybe you should start looking into opportunities to work in those kind of locations. And the other thing he really cared about was his hometown. And he wound up being the town business manager. So, this was, once he realized that he had to think about his fit and his cultural fit, it worked for him. And he was able to transition his skill set to a non-for-profit. So you need to show, and you need to know what the connection is to you and the mission, which again is a little hard for those of us who are like, dude, I'll make your balance sheet sing and dance, and they're like, well, how does that help me, get 10 more kids off the street, right? So as weird as it is to say, most of the time, a for-profit person is focused on the job, not the mission. This is not the case for mission-driven workers. Most are inspired by the mission, and what they do for the mission comes after the fact that they are working for the mission. So this is a perfect example of the difference. John F. Kennedy is touring the first NASA installation in 1961. He stopped the tour to talk to a janitor who was carrying the broom. And Kennedy asked, "What are you doing?" And the man replied, "Well, Mr. President, I'm helping land a man on the moon." And this is the perfect example of the attitudes of mission-driven non-for-profit employees. This is the ultimate example, right? This guy didn't say, well, I'm a janitor and I'm pushing a broom. What the hell do you think I'm doing? He said the mission of the total organization. That's what he talked about. And that happens all the time. And now, of course, we do belong to a networking group. And we have to think about that. So you need to understand your fit. And by that, I'm also saying you need to understand your cultural fit. And you need to understand what is it. I used to tell people, well, what's the thing that makes the behind your eyes go fuzzy? What is it that if you got up every morning and you went and did it, using your skill set, but did it for a different type of organization. What is it that would make you excited to go to the office? So you have to define your areas of interest. You have to target organizations. These are all what I consider networking chores, right? These are things that you do when you network. I do recommend developing a separate non-for-profit resume. And I happen to be someone who I drank the Kool-Aid for networking 20 years ago. And I actually have a group of people who I call every once in a while and ask for ideas and support. And if you can do that for yourself, it's been incredibly helpful for me. I'll digress for a second. When I left the think tank and just wanted to do something else, I had no good reason to leave the think tank, except that I'd been there 10 years and I was stale. My network brought me my next interview. And then as I went through the interview process, I was able to call these guys and say, okay, this is what I'm seeing. What do you think? This is what I'm seeing. What do you think? And it was just such a wonderful process. And if you can build your network up to that level, it is just so important. And it's just, I landed a great job and I got it 100% through networking. The job was never advertised. I had people supporting me and helping me as I was running through the gauntlet. And I just, I have drunk the Kool-Aid. Anybody ever want to have a one-on-one and talk about the power of networking, call me up. So your resume. You need to have a non-for-profit resume, and you need to have a LinkedIn space that will advertise you as open to non-for-profits. So some key things about resumes, even though the people who work in community groups and work for all these organizations bring so many things with them, one of the things they don't bring with them is financial acronyms. Right? So don't talk about ROI. Don't talk about DSO. You can say that you improved collection processes, or you can say we made the organization more efficient. But don't be heavy with the acronyms, because I joined an organization that was run by a lawyer. He was the smartest guy in the room, almost in every room he ever went into. But he didn't know industry acronyms. So just leave them out. Don't belittle your experience with the Little League. Don't disturb, helped out your church board with its annual fundraiser. You should have it somewhere. You ran your kids' Little League. Awesome. Put it down. You were a non-for-profit leader, right? You had experiences. So it's very hard to talk about this, but cultural fit does have more emphasis, I feel, in the non-for-profit industry. And people will say, you're all in the back room and you're trying, you've met 3 candidates, you're trying to talk about, and the conversation will not be, well, this one has more skills, so that's the one you should get. The conversation will be, I think they'll like it here and they'll stay. I think people will like them and will want to work for them. That's what the conversations are like. They're not like, well, who's the sharpest knife in the drawer? Who's the one who brings, the right mix of skill sets? The conversations will move much more to cultural fit. Will they be enjoyable? Will we enjoy them here? And that goes back to my whole conversation of, this industry is just so broad and so different. When I run my team meetings, I talk a lot about There actually is in New York City a free taxi service for trans that runs in Brooklyn from midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning so that transgender individuals will not put themselves at risk. It's got a budget of $75,000, and it's run by its board. On the other hand, in New York City, there is also the largest hospital system in America. That too is a non-for-profit, right? And the Montefiore Hospital system generates 85,000 transactions a day. So if you're somebody who's had a career working in a high transaction, heavily automated billing environment with a large credit and collection bureau experience, you might have a great fit with hospitals, right? So you have to be a little creative and think that way. And then the other thing that I find that some people do is they underestimate. They go, oh, I went and interviewed with this guy and he was wearing an old work shirt and he had hiking boots on, and meanwhile, you're not understanding that this guy has a PhD in urban agriculture and has presented to the UN. So you never can don't underestimate how professional an NFP person is. It's a different kind of workplace, but it can be really exciting, and the people you work with can just be extraordinary. So you're like, okay, so isn't there a lot of things that are the same? And the answer is yeah. Most non-for-profits think about work in a project way. So if you've ever worked in project-based management, you have a great fit with non-for-profit. I mean, if you've ever coded an invoice to a project and to an expense category, bada bing, bada boom, you belong, that's non-for-profit every day, all day long, right? Because they get grants or they do programs and then they capture expenses that way. All non-for-profits want to be efficient. So if you're an efficiency expert, you'll feel very comfortable in the non-for-profit world because they want all the resources to go to the mission. So if you can find super efficient ways to take care of the back office, super efficient ways to, build the financials, then it's a win-win, right? So they love you. Get used to working in a bare bones environment. 90% of non-for-profits in my experience are understaffed and think about infrastructure after they've done everything else. Don't expect to have like 3 administrative assistants. You know what I mean? Most non-for-profits are team management. So if you have experience managing teams, you would feel very comfortable in a non-for-profit environment. And but they are a different environment. So the first thing is a lot of us have a long burn-in period figuring out what the hell is this board thing and why is everybody so worried about the board all the time? So the board asks questions. They need to know everything that's going on. They have ownership of the direction of the organization. Remember I had a slide with the 3 S's. Good boards pay attention to the 3 S's. Infrastructure is something you pay attention to when you've already done all the mission-driven work. So there are a lot of times where you do inefficient things because you don't have the money to invest in efficiencies. Non-for-profits have to publish their financial results. You're required by law to publish them. If you are a non-for-profit in the state of New York, you can go to the New York Charities Bureau of the New York State Attorney General, put in the name of any non-for-profit registered in New York, and see every document that's ever been filed with the state. So it'll be your financial results, your tax returns, your audits, they're all in there. And most non-for-profits probably don't have the kind of salaries that you for-profit folk have gotten used to, but they make up for that with humane workplaces, deeper benefits, more flex and vacation time, and you get to work with really amazingly different and interesting people. Okay, I've been talking straight for 15 minutes. Anybody want to interrupt me and say something like, what the hell are you talking about yet? Jules, you took your mute off.
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna. No, I've been involved in a couple different boards, and it's always about where you feel you're not your comfort zone, but where you want to put your interest in, where you want to put your values in.
Right.
So,
Rich?
Yeah. So Tim, regarding the cycle time, you said if you get involved as a volunteer, and it's actually something I'm doing right now with the newfound free time I have. Typically, how long does it take to build that trust and learn the organization? Is it like 2 years, 3 years to get into a position?
So I don't know. So that's great. That's like a great way to think about it. I honestly think that you're not going to like this answer, but it's kind of like up to the organization that you're dealing with.
Mhm.
It depends, if it's the Philadelphia Orchestra and they've been around for 150 years, there's probably like people who have ossified in place and it's sort of hard to break in.
Yeah.
But and then on the other hand, the Philadelphia Orchestra has terrible fiscal problems. So maybe there's been a lot of turnover and there's a lot of opportunity. So I think you just have to call that by organization. Now, I will say, and it is true, I keep talking about cultural fit and stuff. So you can imagine how wacky the hiring process can become when, first off, like all you guys are seniors, right? So you're going to get interviewed by the senior management. Then they're all going to sit around a room and try to come to a consensus candidate, which, in the for-profit world, they just say, you decide, you're the president, right? But the president wants consensus because, that's part of the thing with non-for-profits. Then you have to go and do the same song and dance for the board, depending on how strong the relationship is between senior management and the board. If the board totally trusts senior management, a lot of times it's a rubber stamp interview. But sometimes the board wants to sort of, hey, wait, I'm going to hire a CFO. This guy really reports to me because, I'm in charge of maintaining solvency. And, all of a sudden you're like on another consensus interview process. So it is true that I think the hiring process in non-for-profits can be an exercise in patience. But I mean, if you're someone who's like you said, you've already been volunteering for more than a year, you've already been on a board, you're ready. You could transition tomorrow. You could be interviewing tomorrow because you already know a little bit of the language. You understand how programmatic work is working. You're there. This whole idea of, well, we can't hire you, you don't have any non-for-profit. You do. So they can't use that against you.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is a slide. I now work with an organization called the National Executive Service Corps, which is volunteers. So if anybody's already made their dime, wants to stop making money, and wants to just help non-for-profits, call me up. The National Executive Service Corps is always looking for pro bono consultants. That's the end of my speech. But this is a slide that we use in NESC, and this is more of a definition of the differences in working for-profit, non-for-profit. You work for profit, the organization's motivated by profit. Non-for-profit, they're motivated by the impact on their mission. Results oriented, mission results oriented. The board is responsible to stockholders. The board is responsible to stakeholders. Employees are motivated by income. Employees are motivated by passion. So are you a great manager? Have you, like, there are CFOs. I've run $20 million organizations. I've had one report, right? But if you're somebody who's used to managing a team and this is a team thing, you have to think about, how do I motivate my employee and make my employees very impactful? And what they're motivated by is not by the fact that I can give them more money. They're motivated by the fact that we're going to have an impact on this mission. In a for-profit life, a board provides oversight and counsel. In the non-for-profit life, the board provides oversight, counsel, and money, fundraising. In the for-profit world, the board's selected for expertise. In a non-for-profit world, you're selected for expertise, but sometimes you're selected because we want a famous name. And sometimes you're selected because you're just loaded, right? So you have this very difficult balancing. For great non-for-profits have a great mix on their board. And don't even start talking about DEI. And then finally, in for-profit, motivated employees are motivated by their income and their career advancement. And non-for-profit, there's some of that, but the staff is motivated by the passion for the cause. So and this really happens every day. Every day you go to a non-for-profit and you say, "What are you doing?" And they say, "Mr. President, I'm helping man land on the moon." You know what I mean? And they're carrying a broom. But all that being said, with a combination of planning, strategic networking, you can make the transition. It happens all the time. And non-for-profits want really good people who fit. And if you don't have 20 years of non-for-profit, that doesn't have to be a problem if you can demonstrate fit other ways. So volunteering, experience on being in a board, experience of being involved with non-for-profits. I don't know how many co-ops they have down where you guys are, but up in New York City, anybody who lives in a co-op and is on the board has served on a non-for-profit. So let's talk about, after all, this is the financial executive networking group. So let's talk about some of the unique problems with accounting FP&A. So in the for-profit world, we all know the matching principle. Some of us I've worked in percentage complete accounting for many years. I think I only worked for one company that actually had audits. And everything is, how much money can we hold on to so the boss is richer, right? Retained earnings. In the non-for-profit world, there's a whole different set of revenue recognition rules. And it sucks. It's like you have to throw away all these revenue rules that you knew and loved. There's the concept of revenue that you get because somebody wants you to do something specific. And there's revenue you get because people just love you. Restricted, unrestricted. Every year you're audited. Every year you have to report back to the people who give you money. So there's a whole layer of financial analysis and presentation skills that have to be developed. And instead of retained earnings, you have this thing called net assets. And those assets are restricted or unrestricted. Now, I'm just going to give you a hint. So when I worked for the think tank, every presentation to every funder had a financial page. For 10 years, the only person who produced that financial page was me. So I created literally 3,000 budgets a year. And in those 3,000 budgets, when we won one, I had to keep it and then report against it, you know, at the reporting requirements of the grant. So if it was a 3-year grant and they wanted to report every 6 months, you know, I did 6 financial reports back to the funder. So, you know, talk about scrubbing your FP&A skills constantly. You know, that can happen depending on the kind of organization you get involved with. Audits are required. If it's over $1 million, it's required. CEO and CFO must sign and certify results. People bitched and moaned about Sarbanes-Oxley. It's wimpy. Board. Every member of the board must sign non-compete documentation. All subsidiary relationships must be disclosed in detail. There's literally pages and pages of reporting requirements in your tax return, affectionately known as the 990. So here I put a circle. That's my boss's signature on the tax return from 2016. You know, it's real. And on top of that, this is public. You can go to websites and pull down any organization in the United States that's reported a 990 and pull out their 990 and review it. Revenues is that thing that sort of makes accountants' head hurt. Revenues are recognized at the time of the gift. So that could be, I got a letter this morning and somebody said, I'm going to give you $100,000 this year. Doesn't matter when they write me the check. They told me they would give it to me. I have to recognize the revenue. Or it could be a grant. So the grant says, we'll give you this money over 2 years, but you have to sign this. And when you sign and accept the rules and conditions of our grant, then we agree that we'll write you the first check. So it's almost like a contract. People have legacy gifts. It could be in kind. My law firm will perform all services for free, and I'm going to donate a whole bunch of office furniture to you guys. Every kind of revenue has to be reviewed for restriction. I love the work you do in voting, so apply this gift to your voting work was on the bottom of the check. Oh, that's restricted. Grants can be provisional. Well, if you finish this report, then I'll pay you for the second report. So it's a mishmash of weird rules. And then on the expense side, so in the world of non-for-profit, allocations are king. Those of us who have been anybody who's ever been a cost accountant, raise your hand. I've been a cost accountant, and I could pick up a Bic pen and tell you how much of the Bic pen was my salary, right? You know, what the 15-cent Bic pen and 0.05 cents of it was my salary, and because it was allocated to everything that was built. So expense tracking and allocations are a big deal. Supporters want to see efficiency in the delivering the mission, but they also need to understand the true cost of delivering the mission, right? So allocations have to have a logic behind them. You can't just like, oh, we have no overhead costs this year. Everything got assigned to the programs. Not allowed. On top of that, we have these wonderful rating bureaus for charities. Charity Navigator is the most famous one. And they rate your performance based on, you got it, your tax return, your 990, because it's public. So they can just grab all your numbers, run them through their little tests, and they make judgments about your performance. So as a strategic thinker, I often had to think about how I present my statement of functional expense, because if I underallocated or overallocated overhead, it would go bump in the night with the rating bureaus. But Despite all the accounting challenges, most financial managers can understand the nuances and differences quickly. I will digress again. So I joined the Brennan Center, and I said to my boss, okay, I understand not-for-profit stuff. I've been doing consulting to these little micro non, but I don't, I haven't really gone through an honest to God audit, but I can do it. And she said, okay, you're hired. And then when the auditor arrived, I made him teach me non-for-profit accounting for 3 weeks. He hated me. He absolutely despised me. But it took me one cycle. And then basically I probably could have, I caught him doing things wrong 2 years later. You know what I mean? Fired him. So, these things and these challenges can be managed. And let's remember, right? Mission-driven work is rewarding beyond the fiscal world. To get into the industry, the barriers for-profit people is not insurmountable. With some skill development and clear understanding of the mission, where the mission has meaning to you, you can cross over to the non-for-profit world. Come to the light, Luke. Here's one I love. The majority of nonprofit professionals, according to an article in 2019, are satisfied and aligned with leadership 84% of the time. So that's why cultural fit is such a big deal. That's why, I mean, how many times have you gone into a meeting in a for-profit environment and gone, the owner's a dick. He's just doing this so he could line his pockets for a new Lamborghini. Or even if it's a large corporation, the CEO is just doing this so that he can, make another penny of payout to the shareholders. 84% agreed with leadership and aligned with leadership and expressed satisfaction. And 92% of fundraisers find satisfaction and alignment. I mean, like, job, if you're looking to work someplace where there's a sense of job satisfaction, the non-for-profit world is there for you. So I love this. So I worked for Michael Waldman for 10 years. You will not know who Michael Waldman is, but if you watched West Wing, Rob Lowe's part was based on Michael Waldman. Michael Waldman wrote 8 State of the Union addresses, I think, or 7 State of the Union addresses for President Clinton. So now here's this guy. He's just spent 8 years in the White House. He's not even 35 yet. He's probably not even 30 yet. And, he could literally write a ticket to any lobbying firm in the country. $1 million a year, no problem. $2 million a year. He literally had everyone in Clinton's cabinet on his speed dial. And what does he do? He moves back to his parents' house in Brooklyn with his babies and his wife. And he goes to work for the Brennan Center for Justice at the enormous salary of $200,000 a year. Because he believed that someone had to step up and save voting in America. This was 20 years ago now, 25 years ago. How many bosses do you have, are that devoted to their cause and mission? My boss at New York Restoration Project was Deborah Martin. Deborah went to Harvard Law School, got into a white shoe group, a white shoe law firm, was making, you partner tracked. And she woke up one day and said, you know what? I don't really like this. She goes back to Harvard and she goes to school for landscape architecture. I don't really know where the passion came from. And she comes out and she's got 3 Harvard diplomas, and she decides that she's going to work for as the capital construction manager for Bette Midler's 54 park spaces in New York City. Extraordinary quality person, resume like you can't believe, connected in the city of New York in a way that you can only dream of. And she decides to go work, not even as the head of a not-for-profit, as the number 3. 2-3 years later, she winds up becoming the head of the not-for-profit. But I mean, like, she had a passion to fix something wrong with urban spaces. And she was going to do that, even if it meant that she wasn't going to make or be the person that her training and her opportunities could make her be. So now you're going in and you're going to take an interview and you're going to say, oh, I can make your balance sheet sing and dance, right? This person, Michael Waldman, wants to know, do you care about my mission? Do you care about voting rights? Do you care about making American democracy work? What do you know about that? Do you understand what it's like? So imagine, like, I had actually worked in manufacturing when I first came out of college. Imagine going into an organization and like, when I first came out of college, I could do variance analysis, rate volume variance analysis in my head because I was doing it so much as a cost accountant. And now I'm working for an organization and their product is ideas and suggested laws. How am I going to convince this guy that I'm the right guy for him to run his books? Somehow he made a mistake and he said, okay. But, it was a cultural fit. It was a personality fit. That organization didn't want a scary person as a CFO. And I'm not a scary guy. So, you have to be prepared when you think about transitioning to the non-for-profit world about the depth and the commitment of the people at the top to the mission. It's just extraordinary. And they're really neat and interesting people. And I can't tell you how many times I enjoyed going into Michael's office thinking that we were going to talk about some numbers exercise and wind up learning how Bill Clinton, coerced somebody to pass a law by talking about quotes from the Old Testament. Like, just extraordinary how it's just an enriching and different environment. Okay, so what are your key takeaways? Non-for-profit industry is huge, right? 10% of the 20% of the GNP. You enormous diversity and difference in the industry. There is a place for everybody in it. In transition, you need to focus on 2 areas. You need to learn about the world. So you can volunteer. And by that, I mean you can serve on a board or you can volunteer directly. You can understand that the NFP world is different, but it really isn't that different, right? It's still project management, so forth. Focus on your cultural fit. Who are you and who do they want you to be? And how do you help this mission, right? And I'm not, look, I'm a numbers guy. I wasn't going to go in there and say, oh, I can help you get Kentucky to change their voting laws. I'm going in there and saying, look, I can help you track your funding and your spending. But at the same time, I was able to say, look, I love this mission. I'm crazy about this. This will be so challenging and interesting. I can't imagine working in a world where I can't talk about widgets anymore. It's great. Recognize that you will have to learn some accounting and reporting responsibilities that aren't in for profit. Recognize that the people you're going to interview with and the leadership of non-for-profits, those people are different. Learn how to relate to them. You know, they're just different. You know, Michael Waldman walked away from $1 million a year paycheck 25 years ago to go run a non-for-profit in New York City, you know. So you need to find the touchstone where you can relate to folk. And it could be personal or it can be impersonal. I have a very bizarre thing, you know, everybody goes, nice Italian kid with a nice Italian name. But my mother is a 13th generation American. I'm actually about as white Anglo-Saxon Protestant as you can get. I've, you know, a lot of mayonnaise in my life. And my great-great-grandfather founded the first playground association in America. Imagine what it was like for me to walk in an interview in an open urban space organization, and I could go, funny thing, you guys wouldn't exist because my grandfather started stuff like this in the 1890s. So, you know, whatever the connection is, use it. And network, research, right? This is a networking organization. We have to do it. Jules?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add what you were saying about the where you relate, and I'll go back to what I said before about you're saying you're Italian, but you're mainly, they say, white Anglo-Saxon.
Right.
I'm Italian, and I'm an immigrant.
Right.
So, and I relate to that, and I always interject a lot of in speaking in my native tongue of Italian. I interject that in a lot of different things, and I talk about cooking, some other things I like, wines, you name it. You make a relationship to it. The church, people you grew up with, you find a commonality, and you build on it. That's how I've been involved in a lot of different organizations. I continue to do that, and that's why I got involved here.
Yeah,
trying to help others along the way. I don't have an answer. It's just we all develop it together.
As I like to say, I always feel bad. I say this all the time, and maybe it's not really fair, but you know, we're all essentially finance guys. We would much rather be in the cubicle developing spreadsheets. Somebody throws hamburgers over the wall every couple of hours so that we can eat something, and you know, the reports go out under the door, right? You know, like we're not naturally in this industry marketers, self promoters, public speakers, so forth and so on. But what we're finding out is as we get promoted and go up the ladder, you do need to have the ability to speak in front of others. You need to be able to present, and you need to develop that skill. And it just sort of, I'm the exception to the rule. I've always been somebody who could be in front of the room as easily as in the back of the room. But you know, it's hard. It's hard to do it. Networking has become so central to who I am that I have no shame at all now. I just, hey, could I have a half hour conversation with you? I'm trying to figure out X. If you're a FENG member and you write an email to me and it says, fellow FENG member looking for a cup of coffee, I will answer every one of those emails. Because what happened was 13 years ago now, I got that email, fellow FENG member looking for a cup of coffee. And that's how I became the chair, well, one of the co-chairs of the non-for-profit SIG in New York City, was because I met somebody for a cup of coffee. And that 13 years of paying it forward, I've had more fun, talked to more people, learned more about myself, and had the richness of being able to really help people. Networking is just like the greatest thing ever. And, you know, calling somebody up and say, Jesus, you're a genius. How did you do it? You get a great conversation out of that. You know, people love talking. You know, there's one subject everybody likes, talking about themselves, right? So, you know, so it's just great. And it's so key to job searching today. Everybody thinks, oh, with LinkedIn and all this stuff that it's an efficient market. BS. The job market is all networking. It's still, you know, Marty Latman in the Bergen County chapter, who's a legend of networking, claims that, you know, it's like 85% of all jobs are found through networking. The number usually in the articles is more like more than 50% of all jobs are found through networking. So my Booker T. Washington quote, those who are happiest are those who do the most for others. Obviously, if you do mission-driven work, you're doing something for someone else. And I walk the walk, I talk the talk. I honestly believe this quote. It is it's the signature on my private Gmail account. I really, really sincerely hope that everybody gets the chance to do more for others. It's been great for me. It's helped me a great deal. So one last thing. First off, my hobby is singing Gilbert and Sullivan. That is me at a Gilbert and Sullivan show. Anyway, nice. I'm right now in 2 organizations. I'm in a fractional CFO organization, Pro CFO, based here in New York City. And it's sort of like the high end of fractional CFO work. But if anybody wants to talk about my journey to find Pro CFO, I just spent 8 months finding them. And as I mentioned earlier, I am very much involved with an organization called the National Executive Service Corps, which is volunteer consultants. But I am going to be the person representing New Jersey for NESC, and I'm the one thing that I'm hoping that as I present more and more is that folks will write me about non-for-profit in New Jersey that I could go have a cup of coffee with. But and on my official LinkedIn and FENG email is timdomini7@gmail.com. So, you know, that's basically the size of it. If anyone wants to shoot the breeze about anything, I am here.
Yeah. We just Tim, we'll go around the room as just a quick introductions of ourselves, and then they can ask a question along the way. So,
sounds great.
All right, that's good. I'll start, and then I'll pick on the lines as we go across. I'm Jules Spigonardo. I've been involved with FENG since 2016, and in 2018, I took over as chair of the suburban chapter. And the reason I took over is just to try to pay it forward. And it was a good thing for me, and I still continue to do that. And I don't have an answer for everybody, but I will look to help you along the way. So, and currently I'm working for a private equity owned company in coming up on 2 years. And doing a lot of transformation for them, helping a lot of different avenues. So, okay, Vince Angelucci, I see up on the top of my screen here.
Hey, Jules, how are you? Thank you. Good. Nice to meet everybody. I guess I'm a spy or something because I'm not a finance guy. I'm actually an IT guy. But Jules kindly invited me to the group, and you know, I've been a chief information officer, and I'm actually currently in the process of looking for a new opportunity. And Tim, thank you very much. This has been quite informative. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts around the IT space. You know, we work very closely, obviously, with finance guys on a regular basis.
There's always opportunities. There's the button I'm looking for. Sorry about that.
There we go.
You know what I would say, and by the way, I have to do a shout out to Dorothy, who's a regular with my group. Um, I would say that many non-for-profits either have severe IT needs because they're transactional. So I don't know where you are, what's your specialty and stuff. They're transactional, and also there's just so much movement to the cloud, and every single non-for-profit financial package, and Dorothy, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing is moving to the cloud. So the security issues, the whole, how do you manage in that environment? And non-for-profits, like everybody else, are being affected very much by the hybrid workspace. So there's enormous challenges there as well. I went to a 2022 a webinar on trends. Two things came out of that. One, key skill, how to be a great supervisor and leader in a hybrid environment. What new skill sets and what's going to make you a great leader if you don't walk by the guy's desk every day. And hybrid is here to stay. Two key takeaways.
Yeah. Well, the
Great.
technology is certainly the enablement for that. So, but a pleasure to meet everybody. So, and thank you again. This was very interesting.
Great.
Rich, you're up next.
Oh, okay. Richard Park. This is my first FENG meeting probably in about 15 years, actually. Been working with a private equity company until recently. And just so happens that this topic fell into place with first thing I did when I was transitioning out of my old position is I immediately volunteered for an organization in Philadelphia that's related to adaptive sports. And never really thought about it much. It's rowing's my sport. And I love getting back into that passion. I'd done it years ago, earlier in my career, but then you get families and kids, and I kind of lost track with getting involved. So this has been great. So thanks, Tim, for the presentation. And my background is, really financial controls, financial FP&A, business partnership in really helping an organization, whether it's a business unit in a pharma company or maybe a not-for-profit organization, help them find their way and develop processes and business plans, et cetera.
Yeah.
Terrific.
George?
Hi, Tim. Thanks very much for the presentation. This is probably one of the first FENG meetings I've ever attended. So it was just something I saw that struck a chord. I've transitioned out of a role I was in for about 17 and a half years. I've been in the leasing industry for over 20 years, and just was looking for something different. And this just struck a chord that it could be very interesting. So, my background has been, I said, in the leasing industry, as a CFO, and running the FP&A team. I also had an operations team that reported to me that was responsible for doing all the transactional work of booking the transactions and classifying leases, and then taking down the leases when they were done. So that's been my experience over the last probably 10 years. And then before that, I was actually involved with the team that actually wrote the contracts and put them out in front of the customers. So so just looking for different opportunities of what's out there. So I do really appreciate it. It was a great, great use of an hour plus.
Yeah, well, thank you, George. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you, Jules.
John?
Hi, Jules. Thanks. I just want to thank Tim as well. I'm currently the director of corporate accounting for a billion-dollar manufacturer in Pennsauken, New Jersey. I actually live in the Harrisburg area, though, so I have a little bit of a commute. And unfortunately, we're going from hybrid back to full-time in the office. I said, this is, I don't really want to be doing that drive much more. Start looking at opportunities. I'm actually talking to a nonprofit in the Harrisburg area right now. So this was very timely for me, and certainly some great information for me as well. So I certainly appreciate everything that you shared, Tim. And I think I may be giving you a call sometime very soon to follow up a little bit more.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough that, that's like the best part of my day is when I get to help people. Like, it's just great when somebody checks in and wants to know a question that I actually think I can answer.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, John. Frank?
Hi, everybody. So I'm a CPA with 25 years of experience. I feel like I'm going to a confession, but it's probably been about 15 years since my last FENG meeting. So I feel, Rich, I'm right there with you with that.
Jules, I brought in all the old timers.
Bringing them back in, Tim. You're bringing them back into the fold.
Beautiful thing.
Don't worry, Jules will give out confession. So how many Hail Marys?
So I've got about 25 more years of experience with both bulk of my experience in life science companies. And currently I'm a director of finance at Eversana Life Science Services. And I manage the FP&A function for $130 million business for the marketing and market access business unit, where we provide consulting services, market research, and full service ad agency services. My career began in public accounting, and a broad range of knowledge in both technical taxation and with a concentration in mostly middle market type companies. So I am looking for a new opportunity. And Tim, I love how you mentioned working in a not-for-profit can provide a humane working environment. So I've seen plenty of inhumane working environments in my career.
And Frank, I want to remind you that a lot of non-for-profits have a social enterprise. I think is the official designation. This idea that you can have in a sense, it's the museum that has a gift shop. Is the gift shop is the social enterprise. So, and it brings up a very complicated set of rules and taxation and what percentage of the non-for-profit can be this business on the side. And so, this could be a great fit for your skill set.
Great. And then one last thing, I just need to give a shout out to George Cruzen on this call. I don't know if George remembers working with me, but I worked with him in the leasing business about 17 years ago.
Yeah, that's about right. So yeah, I did see your messages, Frank. I was just waiting until after the meeting to respond to you.
Okay.
So, good to see you again too.
Thanks for all your time.
Thank you, Frank. Dorothy?
Hi, I'm Dorothy Lease up here in New York City. And as Tim has mentioned, I've floated in and out of the non-for-profit special interest group over, I'd say, the past 15 years, 10, 15 years. And it's interesting being in New York City. My career was finance within Wall Street. So, but there have been times when I have floated out and have a second master's degree from a seminary, and I've also worked for a religious educational institution in fundraising. So I know my Wall Street career, thankfully, is now over. And my goal at the current time is to move back to the Philadelphia area. And I really appreciated Tim talking tonight about reconnecting with your values and your interests. And I have found this period of time in the pandemic world to be quite revealing, because I'm stuck up in New York, but I'm from a Pennsylvania family. So it is exceptionally different, and all the things I've been picking up again are all the things that I did, you know, as a child, and remind me of my family and that sort of stuff. And I'm feeling like a fish out of water to some degree, but I don't want to make major decisions career-wise until I get back down to Pennsylvania and kind of see a different world, because the world that I have been working in does not exist pretty much in Pennsylvania. So I have to do this mental adjustment anyway.
Good.
And by the way, it is hard, Tim, to find avenues in New York City that kind of address my interests. I think I'm definitely a fish out of water in New York City. I'm just out of mainstream.
Well, you know, there's only one of everything in New York, so
Yeah, there's
the thing I worry about the most
it's
is
a
where will you
uni-
get a bagel if you go to Philly?
it's a uni town, and I'm not a uni. I'm like the odd person, so we don't really have places where I fit in.
Plenty of places to get a good bagel, Tim.
I got to go down to the convention center, or, you know, or I should say, I got to go down to the Constitution Center, and maybe I'll fit in
There
down
you
in Philadelphia.
You'll fit in.
Yeah, there I'll fit in, but it not.
No, you'll fit in anywhere you choose. It's your choice.
Yeah, but not New York City.
Yeah, well, Dorothy, thank you. Kathy?
Hi, I'm Kathy Melita. Like many of you, I've probably haven't been to a meeting in about 15 years, so another old timer. I've been in my position about 19 years. I'm a corporate controller for an international consumer goods company, and I would say probably spurred on by the last 2 years of working from home and work changing a lot. I've definitely decided that I would like to make the transition. So when I saw this email in my inbox, I felt like it was calling to me, and it seemed like it was a sign that now more than ever was the time to make the move. So it was very, very informative, Tim. I really appreciate it. And I will probably also be reaching out for some help.
Yeah.
Kathy, have you ever been on a board?
I've not, no. So I made a note of that for sure.
So let me just sort of, if I can, Jules, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
So
no.
So boards can be tricky at times. You know, most non-for-profits use their board as their lead fundraiser. But I'm like, for instance, I'm on the board of a $100,000 a year not-for-profit that does arts in a county called Rockland County, New York. I was approached by someone who I knew, and they said, "Hey, I understand you're a non-for-profit numbers guy." And I said, "Sure, I'm interested, but I don't really have the wherewithal for a significant give or get." And he said, "Oh no, are you kidding? If you'll be our board treasurer, I'll negotiate anything you want for your give and get." You know, so, and it was a great way for me. I had been on like little community boards. I do a lot, as I showed you at the last photo, I do a lot of community theater and stuff. And it was just a great way to go to a bigger, better board. And I just shamelessly used my finance background to get a lower give and get. And it is the fastest, quickest way to learn the language of non-for-profits. There's a website called Board Assist for people who want to look up and see if there's board opportunities. And Lee Tucker, who runs a very large not-for-profit executive networking group, just founded a website called BORED to BORABOARD. So board to board. And again, it's a website that matches your interest to potential boards. And every non-for-profit people rotate off, stuff like that. But I can't stress enough. I thought for a while I wanted to go into the arts as a last career. And on my board is the voice of QXR, which is the New York City classical music station, Elliott Forrest. On my board is a guy who was one of the investors in Supersize Me. On my board is a guy who owns a television production group. On my board is a woman who books bands, was like an A&R person. So, it's just like a fantastic collection of people to network to if I wanted to go into the arts. They just don't pay. So I just volunteer instead.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm new to this group. I'm Matt Rosner. I live in Central Jersey, about an hour south of Manhattan. I have been a CEO and CFO and controller for the last many years. Lately, I've been working with private equity companies, and I'm at the point in my career when I want to make a change and start giving something back. And I've often thought about this, and Tim, you gave a really good presentation and just opened my mind to a lot of things. I have two friends, one who's been a CFO for a not-for-profit in DC and another one who's one in Bergen County. And they're both very happy with what they do. They don't make the kind of money like you say, but there's a lot of satisfaction in what they do. And, you reach a point in your life, I think, when you start to say, it's time for me to turn that around and give back. And I guess my big decision is where would I want to put that energy? But thank you for giving me some insights and some information. I appreciate that. And also, just one more thing, I am also an infrequent member of FENG. I think I go to a lot of Marty Latman calls.
Marty is my pal, man. Me and Marty, man, we've been, so I'll just to give you a hint how long it is. I was at Marty's first meeting for the FENG.
Wow.
Marty still makes fun of what I was wearing that day.
Yeah. He was one of our guest speakers also. So Marty.
Yeah, Marty's the best. He's a great guy.
And
Matt, I'll just say one thing about, do be thoughtful about what mission, right? Don't just say, oh, I don't want to work for the man anymore. You have to say, oh, this really makes me feel good. I would love to help with this.
Okay, I hear that. Thank you.
Sure.
No, I just wanted to add, having these Zoom meetings, we've had people from across the country. We've had some from outside the country also. So international meetings also. So it opens it up to a lot of people. So when we look at it, Matt, as you're saying, you're from Central Jersey. We're all from FENG.
Yeah.
So, no, I just say I want to thank everybody this evening, and we have the Philadelphia and the suburban chapter. We have 2 meetings a month. Usually Ernie runs these. He had a conflict tonight. He's on a Catholic Church Catholic Appeals board, so he was there. That's where he had to go tonight, and he had that same conflict last month. So we tag team on these meetings all the time. So I want to thank I want to thank Tim first this evening. I want to thank everybody for joining, and feel free to connect. I know a couple of you, and we'll connect, and we can help you out along the way. Let's go from there. Let's help one another out, and as Tim said, just to pay it forward. So like I said, I'm on a couple of boards, and it's non. I'm started on a board with a sports board for a local soccer association, and then from there it took me to the township zoning board. So totally out of it's how you relate to people and how you connect. So just and a couple of the boards also. So I've been getting involved with. So it's just it's just a passion that you have. So as Tim said. So
it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on the FENG website. If you were quick, you saw my other email, my 3 emails on the last slide. And, you know, networking is not something you do by coming to meetings. So you know, I really hope somebody reaches out. We'll do a virtual cup of coffee. And I'm not fully applied. In fact, I'm barely applied at all right now. So I have lots of time for cups of coffee.